Welcome back to the Elder Law Out Loud podcast. I'm Carla Ray here with CEO and founding attorney of Florida's largest elder law firm, Family First Firm, Jeff Hotzen. And today we are talking about long-term care. We deal with long-term care on the side of, Medicaid qualification, asset protection, trying to make sure that our clients don't lose everything to pay for long-term care. He actually wrote a book on this. Pretty passionate about this topic, but a lot of times our clients will come in and they're very confused about the different types of long-term care settings. And I'll be honest, when I first started here at the firm, I didn't know there was a difference in any of these.
Yeah.
So we've got a number of different care settings, starting with long-term care at home. Talk about, the different types of ways that somebody could be cared for in their home. There's hospice options, there's Medicaid options. Take it away.
Yeah, so where we often see care in the home is people coming and helping, whether that's private duty or in-home care, the concept of people coming in providing, whether it's like housekeeping, cooking, to more, I would say medical-esque sort of things, whether it's bathing, dressing, toileting if somebody's bedbound, changing, the say bedpans and things of that nature, and then administering medications, IVs, pills, that sort of stuff. It really ranges from base level stuff all the way to some fairly intensive medical treatment that you can receive at home, which is of course where if most people had to choose where they would want care, it would be in their home.
Yeah.
So some of it, to your point, Medicaid will pay for in-home care through the Medicaid waiver program. That's technically called the Hub Community-Based Services Program, but everybody refers to it as WAICA. As a reminder for those people who watched our show, that does have a wait list associated with it that could go anywhere from 6 months to 2 years or more. Hospice will pay for some in-home care. It is a lot more limited.
Couple hours.
Yeah. It's definitely not to the extent that you can get through Medicaid, where you can get up to 40 hours a week or beyond if you're willing to fight for it. Anything beyond 40 hours always requires an appeal and a fight. It is doable, but the full fee that's having 40 hours a week to maybe a couple hours, 3 days a week or something like that for hospice, it's a fairly significant difference. And then people pay out of pocket. People do all kinds of different things to get care at home. I can tell you, before my grandmother passed away, she had a woman who lived with her, and she had free room and board and food, and she got $500 a month. And so she also cleaned houses on the side. And then when she was back there living with my grandmother, she took care of my grandmother. And so there are such a wide variety of different ways that you can receive care.
Yeah. And the bottom line is if you can pay for it.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, definitely. Yeah. And, some of these agencies charge $25, $30, $35, $40 per hour for people to come in and provide care. And, that's a lot of money. That's definitely where something like Medicaid, if they come in and pay for it entirely and you have no out of pocket, that's an astronomical.
Yeah. So at some point, if the care levels exceed what can be provided at home, our clients are then looking at either assisted living, sometimes with certain diagnoses, memory care, or that top tier, which is the skilled nursing or a nursing home. What does an assisted living look like compared to those other levels?
So in assisted living, you're going to have your own apartment. You're going to have your own little home in this building. They tend to be fun, nice. They'll take you out on field trips to a winery or a brewery.
Nice ones.
Yeah,
Really
the nice ones for sure. Yeah. A lot of them will have, movie theaters in there. They have people there who will provide some help and assistance, but the expectation is that you're able to do a lot of stuff on your own. The help assistance, whether it's medication management, maybe it's mobility issues, or helping you, get out of bed into a wheelchair, and then you're kind of wheeling yourself around, or maybe they're helping you, maybe, providing you some support, making sure you're safe while showering, those sorts of things. It's definitely not round the clock total care. It's not nursing care. It's basically just what it sounds like, assistance. They're assisting you living, and so in those type of settings, they tend to be for people who are a little more able to be on their own, a little more independent. Not fully independent, obviously, but it's definitely a significant difference on the memory care than the nursing settings.
You know what it kind of reminds me of whenever I go into any of the assisted livings that we work with closely? It sort of reminds me of dorm life when
Yes.
you're in college. Because you have your own little dorm room apartment where you can go back to, you can shut the door and you can, close off the world. But if you want to socialize, there's always going to be somebody out that you can talk to. There's always going to be an activity going on. So I think it's a good option for folks who are maybe concerned about their parents aging or their loved ones aging. And they don't necessarily feel comfortable with them being home alone, but they still, want to maintain some independence.
Yeah.
In a lot of these buildings, they also have memory care. They call them memory care units or memory care wings. What does that mean for somebody who has no clue about what that is?
For someone that has a cognitive impairment diagnosis, whether that's dementia, Alzheimer's, Lewy body dementia, frontal lobe, what any of those sorts of diagnoses that result in people, struggling with memory and cognition, it's a place for them to be safe. And that's really the ultimate goal, is making sure that, as we age and, maybe if there is cognitive impairment, that it doesn't mean that now somebody is, like we see sometimes they'll be wandering in the evenings and they'll get out of the house and they'll be wandering down busy streets at 3 in the morning, because they don't remember where they are, who they are in some cases. And so, that's very scary. So these types of memory wings or memory facilities are designed to ensure that access or getting out is limited, that they're in a protective environment, and that they can be as independent as possible given their diagnosis while still, like I said,
Yeah. And so not all assisted living facilities have memory care.
correct,
And what are sort of the requirements to have in place in those locations in order for it to be called a memory care unit?
Yeah, it's generally going to be, what we call something like lockdown access, wander guard, those sorts of things, basically to make sure that people with access-seeking tendencies aren't able to do that. That's truly the most important thing. As far as staffing, there's some different staffing requirements in those facilities. And then, generally what you would see is, just a different level of, how do I want to phrase it? Pretty nicely. That you'll notice distinct difference between if you're in a facility that has assisted and memory. The assisted is very beautiful, well decorated, that sort of stuff. And the memory, it's a little more utilitarian.
Clinical. Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas design really more to ensure safety, not beauty.
Okay. But still more comfortable, I would say, probably than most nursing facilities.
For sure.
When you get to that level and you need that round the clock care, talk about the difference between a nursing home and what we've just discussed.
So nursing homes are really stepped down from hospitals. Most nursing homes have two distinct sides to them, if you will. There's the rehabilitation side, which is for people who have been admitted to a hospital. I mean, I guess they don't have to have been, but that's generally what happens is they'll go to a hospital first because they had some sort of medical event. They had a surgery, they had stroke or heart attack or
fall.
Yeah, you name it. They go to the hospital, whatever, the hospital gets them to the point where they're stabilized, and now they need to go through physical therapy, occupational therapy to get their strength back to be able to leave, hopefully. That's where the rehab comes in. Medicare pays for rehab for the first 20 days. From day 21 up to 100, you would have a copay. Oftentimes, any supplement policies you have would pay for that. But if that's the most part of this for these facilities, they love the rehab. For people who get to a point where they can't go and the rehab cuts off, but they need to stay in that protected environment, that's when they shift over to the long-term side. And that is a lot more clinical, even like the other things that we've been talking about. It's truly more of what you would think of as a hospital setting. You'll oftentimes have semi-private rooms, which means there's a bed and a sheet, and then a bed on the other side of that sheet. And so it's like a shared room. One bathroom for the two of them. Each of them has a TV and they're competing for.
And it's so loud. It's so loud all the time.
Yeah, I mean, it's that not a lot of personal things. A hospital bed, where basically they're sitting maybe a recliner or something like that, a chest of drawers, and that's probably about it in these rooms. So it's much more austere, I guess I would say. Just very very clinical, utilitarian, staffed by nursing assistants or nurses and nursing assistants that, are there to be able to provide the highest level of care that you'd receive outside of a hospital.
Yeah. And so that's the most expensive
Yeah.
typically of all the care settings. Is that because it's a 24-hour care
Yep.
staffing arrangement?
Yeah. So, and you have a higher skill level of staff. And the expectation is they're people who need substantial care, like you said, around the clock care. And so it tends to be the most expensive, sometimes starting $13,000 and going up from there per month.
Yeah. A lot of times our clients are just dreading that idea, not just because of the cost, but because of how you described it. That it's basically your loved one is in a hospital bed, potentially sharing a room with a stranger. What are some things that people can do if they are facing nursing home care to make it a little more palatable, um, maybe a little more like home?
Sure. I mean, you guys bring in a lot of your own things. Where you kind of can sometimes struggle with that is you may have other residents in the building who maybe suffer from some cognitive impairment, maybe not enough to justify being in a memory care setting. But sometimes those people will be wandering in and out of rooms, things get lost or taken and misplaced. But people will absolutely bring in things to kind of remind them to spruce it up, so to say. I think, from not only having it be more homey, but truly to ensure that their loved ones get great care. I think the two most important things you can do is be there regularly. The more that you go there, you see your loved one, the more the staff at that facility will know. I hate to say it like this, but they know that they're hot,
Mhm.
and so they're more likely once to get yelled at. So they're more likely to give their loved one more attention if you're there frequently. And then, my grandfather was at a nursing home for over 10 years for sure. Might have been closer to 20, honestly.
Mhm.
Um, but my grandmother would go there 3 times a day to see him all the time. But she would take a lot of stuff to the people who worked there. She loved cooking, and so she would bake goods.
So bribery.
Yes, nobody is above bribe. Like we're all people, And so now in this case, she's taking sweets and
Yeah.
food and stuff like that, and developed friendships with these people who then necessarily are going to want to take better care of her husband because she was taking care of them. And so, to the extent that you can do that stuff, bring a box of donuts, a box of chocolates, whatever, here and there, over the holidays, maybe you give them a card with $20 in it, whatever. Those sort of things go a long way in ensuring that your loved ones get the best care possible in the facility.
Mhm. We do a lot of Medicaid qualification planning for our clients here, and the question I get, I think, most often, other than will Medicaid take my house, is are there nice Medicaid facilities? And when they say Medicaid facilities, they mean nursing homes that take Medicaid, and that's a big misnomer because almost all nursing homes in Florida take Medicaid. There are ways to make sure that your room is a little bit nicer if you do have some money set aside, right? In addition to Medicaid funding it. Can you explain that?
Yeah, so a lot of facilities will allow you to pay the difference to get a private room rather than a semi-private, which is exactly what it sounds like. Instead of sharing a room with somebody else, you have your own room. And a lot of facilities will let you pay the dollar difference that it would cost per day or per month in order to have your loved one be in that space versus being in the semi-private with some stranger who may want to watch TV at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Hmm.
So, that's an option if you have those funds set aside. It's generally not substantial because they're going to take the Medicaid rate first. Then whatever the difference would be in that daily rate is what they'll charge you.
Do you have a rough estimate of how much that difference is?
I think it varies pretty drastically. I've seen it be $1,000 a month. I've seen it 2,500 a month. I've never seen anything beyond that.
Okay.
So it just
Yeah, it kind of depends on the building and probably part of the state. Okay, so we've covered the most basic care settings. We also have what's called CCRC.
Yeah.
Explain what that is, because that's if you can get it on the ground level, it sort of allows for a continuum of care.
And that's exactly what it stands for, is the continuum of care retirement community. So basically everything that we talked about so far, kind of, because it's not really at home, but
But they do have independent
they
living.
do have independent living. That's right. So they have independent living, assisted living, memory care, and skilled nursing. Now, most of these places you have a buy-in, so you pay $1, $2, $3, $500,000 to get into the place, and then you pay monthly to be there for your independent living room. And then if you need assisted living, well, then that's an additional charge. And if you need memory, that's an additional charge. And if you need skilled nursing, it's an additional charge. But you're guaranteed to stay there for the rest of your life. So they will always have care setting that's appropriate for you. And even if you run out of money, they will keep you there until you pass away. So you kind of know that you're going to move here and this is where you're going to be able to stay no matter what happens in your future. So that's very attractive to some people who have assets and want to make sure that ultimately, they live out in a lot of these places are very swanky, very beautiful there.
It better be.
Yeah,
You're
for the
buying in for
multi six figures.
yeah.
Yeah, and some of that is refundable depending on the place and the contract you choose. Sometimes your children or state can get like 95% of that back. So that down payment isn't necessarily a sunk cost. There's different plans and things like that. But ultimately, these places are very nice. You can go there and be like, hey, this is where you get to live out my life, and it's going to be a pretty place. It's going to be good food. There's going to be stuff to do. People my age that can develop new friendships. So we have shared experiences throughout life because we grew up at the same time. And so you end up kind of being able to have a community there that you age with in place, and you'll be around them as you, like I said, about your life.
Yeah. Do any of those places ever take government assistance, like Medicaid? Typically not.
Generally not. Yeah. They take Medicare. Everybody takes Medicare, because I told you it's the big bucks for the rehab. So, sometimes we'll have people who are coming to us for Medicaid, and then they'll say, oh, my loved one is at whichever CCRC rehabbing right now, and we'd love to keep them there. I'm like, I'm sure you would. Yeah, I would love for you to be able to keep them there too. But
I would like to live there.
Yes, exactly. Yes. But it will cost you, $300,000 to get it there, and then about $20,000 a month because Medicaid isn't going to pay for that nursing home. Now I have been told that if you somehow manage to run out of money in one of those places, they will apply for Medicaid for you, and they will accept it. I don't know. I'll say I don't know the truth of that or not, because my understanding of how Medicaid works is it's not an option. So as far as you either take it or you don't in that setting. So my understanding is that they don't. But the bottom line though is that you aren't going to be able to stay in a place like that and have Medicaid paid for your nursing home care.
Okay. But there's something for everybody. There's options. What advice can you give to people who are just maybe hitting retirement age and planning ahead, which not everybody does? Sure. Yeah.
So, I think, and I think we've talked about this in other episodes of this, but, talking about long-term care, looking at those policies, not your traditional long-term care insurance, but the hybrid policies, whether it's a life insurance policy with a long-term care rider or a long-term care annuity. There's a number of different types of things out there that can really provide financing to get the care you need when that time comes. So that instead of scrambling, you have kind of a pot of money to work off of. Sometimes those things are expensive, and sometimes you may have pre-existing medical conditions that disqualify you. In those circumstances, we will have a estate plan that we do here, Fortress Trust, that would allow assets in there. Think of like a savings account. You use it all the time, but you have access if you need it. And ultimately, then, if you needed long-term care at some point, you can apply for government benefits to pay for you because they won't count the assets in that trust against you. Now, you're supposed to do it more than 5 years before you apply for the benefits. So, it's not like something you could just throw all your money to trust and turn around and say, hey, help me, I'm broke.
Yeah.
But if you're thinking ahead, if you're planning ahead, it's a great strategy. Sometimes people use those in conjunction with the long-term care products, the insurance policies or annuity, because that it guarantees that some stuff is protected, but they've also given themselves a pot of money that they can use to, most people use it to stay healthy. So, if they're waiting for Medicaid to kick in, or they just want to stay at home as long as possible, or they want to go really fancy, assisted living facility or something like that, they do have money to do that while ensuring that everything else is protected.
Where are you going to go?
Oh, goodness. Don't.
50, 60 years from now, your care setting.
Yeah, no, I obviously, if you had to choose, you want to be independent as long as possible. Yeah. Hopefully at home, but for that, I think everybody wants to stay in the least restrictive setting that you can. So you try to stay independent, you can't assist it. And then ultimately, when you have to, people go skilled. There's something close to 2 million people in this country in nursing homes right now. And not a single one of them raised their head and said, hey, I want to go to a nursing home. They went there because they had to.
Yeah.
So.
And to put, anybody listening, to put your mind at ease, there are some very nice nursing homes as
Oh, for
well.
sure.
I think we have this image in our minds, probably from movies, and maybe you've had one bad experience, and then you've painted all of them with that same light. But there are some really nice places in the Orlando area that I would send my loved ones to if they needed it, and just know that there are options. I think that's the point of this whole episode, is to
Right.
understand the options and give some clarity. So,
And if you want to learn a lot more about this, the whole first section of this book, The Heirloom Journey, talks about these care settings and more, and all the different ways you can get care. It is on Amazon, and
Yeah.
and this guy wrote it.
Heirloom. Yeah, that's
So,
right.
thank you so much for your expertise as always, and thank you for listening and watching. We'll see you next time.